Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Senior News Editor with Retail Insider. Joining me today is Bruce Winder, who is a retail analyst and consultant. Thanks for joining us today, Bruce.
Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Well, I want to talk to you about the holiday shopping season coming up. Coming up, many ways, I guess we're already in it.
For sure.
I see different reports all over the place. Like I see some reports showing spending is going to be up and higher than it was a year ago
Yeah.
in the last couple of years. Yet then I see other reports that say the complete opposite. What are your thoughts? What do you think is going to happen this year?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Mario, because you're right. You see a lot of different reports, and there's like we talked about previously. There was a pretty important study that came out from Deloitte this week
Yeah.
that talked about consumers and what they're spending on. And my take is that it's going to be a pretty tough holiday season overall. Dollars, if you look at sales dollars, will probably be flat to up a little bit, but it's all inflation. In other words, unit purchases will be down, but dollars will be flat to up based on the high inflation we're currently looking at about 8% roughly. Around, I guess it's went down to about 6 or 7% now. But you're going to see that. I mean, some of the big undercurrents this season are inventory. So there's quite a few retailers who have excess inventory right now,
Yeah.
based on a number of issues, based on sort of supply chains catching up with them, as well as ordering merchandise a year in advance before we knew that inflation would jump to where it's at now, and before we started talking about recessions, before the stock market tumbled, before housing prices went down. So the reality is retailers probably have a little more inventory than they wanted. So if you put that together, you're probably going to see some pretty good discounts, and you're going to see the action start a little earlier this year.
Yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit about that. I was on a panel discussion this week here in Calgary about supply chain stuff, and it came to retail, and the people involved on there were from Urban Barn and from London Drugs, and they both talked about promos this year, sales.
Right,
Uh,
right.
so, what do you think is going to happen in that regard? Uh, uh, you know,
It's gonna be a funny one, Mario, because you know what? Regular prices are all up. So if you look at regular prices that you'd see on the shelf right now, they're all up, call it, 6, 7, 8%, depending on the category, depending on the retailer, a little more, a little less. And then so you're gonna face that sticker shock, but what you'll probably see is some decent discounts in terms of save story percentages. So, 30, 40% off on some stuff, 25% off. Maybe a couple of years ago or last year, it wasn't such a deep discount because inventory was hard to come by. And consumers were still nervous about COVID, and they weren't looking to shop around as much as they used to. So last year, retailers could back off a little bit on discounts. This year, it's the opposite, albeit, it's going to be on a higher regular price than we've ever seen.
yeah, and when we're looking at, and you talked about the shopping earlier, well, I guess that's been a trend for the last few years, has it not? You're almost thinking now that the back to school shopping is really the beginning of the holiday shopping season.
It is. I mean, one of the biggest changes we've seen in Canada in the last, 15 years is the emergence of Black Friday from the US. And
Yeah,
that started about, call it 10, 13 years ago, 10, 12, 13 years ago, because our dollar was at par with the US greenback, and retailers had to react. But since then, it's taken on a life of its own. But one of the things that's really unique about Black Friday now is it's really sort of Black Friday month instead
yeah,
of Black Friday day. Everyone is starting discounts and promotions way earlier. Even Amazon this year came out with they didn't call it Prime Day, but sort of like a second Prime Day
yeah.
that they had last couple weeks ago, this week actually. And supposedly it did kind of okay, but not great. But you're going to see more of that. You're going to see more early activity from everyone trying to get out there. They realize that shoppers are looking for discounts. They want to get out early. They want to claim those savings. So you're going to see some pretty big differences this year.
Yeah, when you look at the landscape out there, the retail landscape, this period of time, is it really make or break for a lot of retailers?
Yeah, it all depends on what categories you're in, but a lot of the
Yeah,
categories peak and have their pinnacle in the fourth quarter. So definitely, if you're into any type of product that's bought as a gift, this is your whole time. You know, if you sell toys, this is a really important time for you, gifts, etc. So yeah, it is really a make or break. And what's kind of a little sad this year that we may see in January is, this is the first fall in a couple years where we haven't had government supports for
yeah,
small businesses. So it's realistic and unfortunate that you're probably going to see more small businesses close shop in, call it January, February. They're trying to make a go of it this fourth quarter by themselves without government supports post COVID. The world's changed a lot post COVID.
yeah.
Everything's against them in terms of getting people, having too much inventory in some cases, inflation. It's just going to be a really tough time. So sadly, you'll probably see a few more folks go bankrupt in the new year than normal.
Yeah. Bruce, what are you hearing about supply chain for this fall and what's happening in the retail sector?
Yeah, I'm not hearing a lot about supply chain in terms of it being as much of a problem anymore. It's still a little messy. I'm hearing that costs have went down considerably, especially container costs coming from Asia to Canada, significantly down.
Yeah,
So supply chain is becoming less of an issue. Where you might see some issues is sort of in that middle mile to last mile, because there's a bit of a labor shortage out there, especially for entry level jobs.
yeah,
Last time I checked, Canada was short about 1 million jobs. So you might see some problems as it relates to that, and that may force up some wages. But I'm starting to hear that supply chains are kind of getting back to normal-ish, which is good for retail.
okay, super. Now, when you look at all the pressures out there on consumers today, with the cost of living and inflation, all those costs rising, any particular categories do you think in retail that are going to be impacted by consumers maybe holding holding more money in their wallets?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a few things in play. Inflation is obviously really high in places like food and food products. That's where it's really capped off. You're going to see some sort of a lot of issues probably in spending as it relates to things like clothing and also consumer electronics, because during the pandemic people loaded up on consumer electronics and may not need to buy as much in that regard, and that's why you see some activity from folks like Best Buy. Clothing too was over inventoried this summer, this spring, so you're probably going to see some pretty big discounts on that. And we still haven't sort of hit the mark in terms of everyone coming back to the office, white collar workers going back to the office. There's still a lot of companies where people are working 2 or 3 days a week from home,
Yeah.
and they just haven't invested as much in some of that clothing as they maybe people thought they would by this time.
Yeah, and Bruce, when obviously traditionally the holiday season, we've always talked about the Boxing Day sales, and Boxing Week sales. They've gone on for a longer period of time. What do you expect this year for Boxing Days, considering that we're going to have a lot of promos and sales earlier in the year? People are shopping earlier in the year.
I think we're going to have a pretty decent Boxing Week, so to speak, or Boxing Day. As you know, and I know, Boxing Day, Boxing Week has sort of taken a second profile, lower profile to Black Friday in the last few years, and that's going to continue. But you're going to see probably a healthy Boxing Day because people are going to be stuck. Stores are going to be stuck with inventory, and they're going to need both, sort of discounts early in the season as well as post-holiday discounts to clear inventory. So I think you'll see a pretty decent. Assortment and pretty decent discounts come Boxing Day again, Boxing Week.
All right, super. Thanks, Bruce, for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. Take care.
All right, that was Bruce Winder, who is a retail expert, analyst, and consultant in the industry. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, senior news editor with Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.